Hello, my name is Gary Smith, and I'm a pediatric injury, violence, and prevention researcher and advocate at the Center for Injury Research and Policy at Nationwide Children's Hospital in Columbus. And I want to thank you all for joining us today for our webinar on teen driving safety. The webinar is hosted by two organizations, the Trainees for Child Injury Prevention, also known as T4CIP, and by Prevent Child Injury. The first organization, T4CIP, is a group of trainees, specifically medical students, pediatric residents, and fellows from across the country who are committed to child injury prevention and who develop outreach materials and strategies for one-day national advocacy campaigns. And today is their Rules for the Road Day of Action about teen driving safety. T4CIP is sponsored by the Center for Injury Research and Policy in Columbus, Ohio, and the American Academy of Pediatrics section on pediatric trainees and the Council on Injury, Violence, and Poison Prevention. And if you're a trainee and you're interested in applying for to join the 2025 T4CIP cohort, applications are now open until December 1st, and so follow the link in the chat to learn more about the group and to apply. The other webinar host is Prevent Child Injury, which is a national group of organizations and individuals, including researchers, health professionals, educators, and child advocates, working together to prevent injuries to children and adolescents. Prevent Child Injury promotes communication to the public about child injury prevention through coordinated campaigns that include outreach materials and resources. And the most recent campaign is on teen driving safety. To become a member of Prevent Child Injury or for more information about child safety advocacy, click the link in the chat. Membership is free. I want to let everyone know that a link to the recording and handouts from today's webinar will be sent by email to all those who registered. And now I'm pleased to introduce to you Dr. Flaura Winston, who is the moderator of our webinar. Dr. Winston is Director of the Innovation Ecosystem and Distinguished Chair in the Department of Pediatrics at Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, also known as CHOP. And she's a tenured professor of pediatrics at the Perelman School of Medicine at the University of Pennsylvania. At CHOP, she is the founder of both the Center for Injury Research and Prevention, a center of emphasis at CHOP, and also the Center for Child Injury Prevention Studies, which is a National Science Foundation industry and university cooperative research center. Her interdisciplinary background in medicine, engineering, and public health has allowed her to conduct groundbreaking research in pediatric injury prevention, and I think we all know her best for her important work in the area of motor vehicle occupant safety. In recognition of her scientific accomplishments, and she has many recognitions, but one of them is that she was elected to the National Academy of Medicine in 2017. Flora's also mentored many leaders in injury science, so let me encourage you to contact her if you're interested in advancing young driver research as a postdoctoral fellow or as a junior faculty member in her group. Flaura, I will turn things over to you now to introduce our distinguished panel members. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gary. It's such an honor to be here, and I'm thrilled to see there are so many people online who care about our adolescents, making sure that they are safe on the road, but also get this wonderful skill set to be able to be independent. So I'm going to start with a few comments and then turn it over to each of my esteemed panel members to both introduce themselves and also give their perspective. So why are we here today? We're here because motor vehicle crashes are one of the leading causes of death and acquired disabilities for adolescents, and they're highly preventable. Research indicates that drivers aged 16 to 19 are involved in a higher percentage of crashes compared to other age groups because they actually have inexperienced. They lack the skills that they need a lot of times when they start driving. They are distracted and they have risk-taking behaviors. These factors are a perfect storm that contribute to a dangerous environment on the road for many of our teens. And so therefore they experience crash rates nearly 3 times those of older, more experienced drivers. What's the consequence of all of this? It's devastating. We all know that when we hear about a teen who's died in a high school and how that affects everyone. We lose about 2,000 teens every year to motor vehicle crashes, with many more sustaining serious injuries. There are things that are related to high-speed driving, driving under the influence, but the thing that really bothers me the most is when they just don't know how to drive. The financial implications of teen driver crashes are staggering. It could be in the billions of dollars a year due to medical expenses, lost productivity, considering that these happen so early in their lives, property damage. They affect not only the driver, but also other people on the road. About 1/3 of the people who die in motor vehicle crashes are not the teen driver. They're the other people, the passengers and the vulnerable road users. The good news is that there are many successful interventions that have emerged. Graduated driver licensing programs, parental involvement, educational initiatives that really get teens to be driving under less risky conditions, gaining the skills they need, reinforcing positive behaviors. There are wonderful educational campaigns in schools. We need to get more of these out there and recognize what an issue it is. Additionally, we need to think about the teens with atypical development, with medical conditions. These teens may face unique challenges when learning to drive and their decision-making abilities, and it's crucial for the doctors here to recognize that this is an activity of daily living that they should be considering for their adolescence. Finally, there's a growing recognition of the need for mandatory reporting when individuals are deemed unfit to drive. Medical conditions, behavioral conditions can impair not only the ability to drive, but the ability to pay attention to the road. And this is really a very important responsibility of many adolescent physicians and pediatricians in our country that they should take seriously. Therefore, I really see clinicians as at the front line of preventing this major epidemic of motor vehicle crashes, to guide teens and their families to safely drive before they crash. Ideally, to get them the skills they need before they're licensed and to set things in place to keep them safe. All of today's speakers are passionate, skilled advocates for safe, equitable mobility. We recognize that driving can bring independence, employment, and education, but we need to know that there's the responsibility of having several thousand pounds of steel that you're controlling. For a moment, let me just let you know that it is feasible to make a difference. We at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia have a program that's sponsored by NJM Insurance, where we've incorporated teen driver safety into adolescent care across the spectrum. So all 13-year-olds and older are asked a wide variety of questions, and starting at age 15, they're asked if they drive or plan to drive in the next year. For those who are 15 and older, they're offered a virtual driving assessment that assesses their safety skills in a validated tool, and they're given feedback to tell them how to be better drivers, as well as videos and what to improve. And so this is something that's feasible. 7,000 adolescents have already been screened. I encourage all of you to think about how to incorporate driving into your routine care and to think about precision, person-centric prevention so that all teens can move on. And again, if you are interested in working with us in this very important health issue, please contact me. Now I'm going to turn it over to my esteemed colleagues. And first, let me introduce you to Federico Vaca, and I'll let him tell you more about his background.
Great. Thank you, Flaura. I truly appreciate this opportunity to be able to speak to everybody today, this morning, morning for me, a little bit later on the East Coast. My name is Federico Vaca. I'm the Executive Vice Chair and Professor here at the Department of Emergency Medicine at the University of California, Irvine. And I've been involved in the traffic safety research world for over 20 years and continue to do so with my work of a particular interest in teen and young drivers. And it's not just the drivers and their behaviors, but also their families, their parents that are so intimately and typically, closely engaged with getting the teens driving, trying to keep them safe, and all the other pieces that come along with that. So it's wonderful to be able to be here today to speak to you about this such an important issue.
Wonderful. Let me turn it over to Devin. Can you please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit more about NHTSA and what NHTSA has been doing?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today for this important webinar. I'm Devin Burke. I'm a highway safety specialist in the impaired driving division at the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. NHTSA's mission is to save lives and prevent injuries on our roads, and we're part of the U.S. Department of Transportation. I will direct you to NHTSA.gov, where you can learn about all sorts of things that we do in the various areas that we work in. So I know we have lots of things to cover today, and you can really do a lot of reading there. I wanted to talk a little bit about why I think traffic safety is so important, especially for teens. Almost everybody has a story of a family member who's been injured or someone they've lost in an avoidable crash. Whenever I tell people where I work and what I do, someone always tells me a story of a friend or family member who was injured or killed, especially by an impaired driver. Too often those stories start with when I was in high school. And sometimes they'll share how they got a DUI and how that was a wake-up call because they finally realized that they were engaging in a dangerous behavior. I think informing young people about what it means to be a safe driver and road user is key. And it's important to talk to kids early and often about what it means to be safe. I know they roll their eyes, but repetition is really important. And I think medical providers in particular have a unique opportunity as highly respected and trusted individuals to influence behavior. But it's important to make connections between how being injured in a crash can change your physical and mental health for the rest of your life. People can sometimes be glib about being in a crash, but they can be incredibly violent experiences. And we tend not to think of them like that, but being a safe road user is really part of a healthy lifestyle. I think the same way getting enough exercise and eating a balanced diet is, just like so many things related to health, prevention is crucial. It starts when we're children and we hold someone's hand across the street and continues throughout our lives. So I'm really excited to be here today and talk about all of this with you, and I look forward to the discussion ahead.
Thank you so much, Devin. And our last panelist is Dom Tiberi. Dom, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and about Maria's message?
There we go. Yes, my name is Dom Tiberi, and for 43 years, I've been the sports guy at WBNS TV in Columbus. But today I'm here not as Dom, the sports guy that covers the Buckeyes. I'm here as Maria's dad. A little over 11 years ago, September 17th of 2013, we lost our 21-year-old daughter, Maria, in a car crash, which was ruled a distracted driving crash. My life changed. And at that time, I did not realize, I've been in the news business, like I said, 43 years, and I did not realize at that time the leading killer of children in the United States, age 8 to 24, was car crashes. And you might say that was my aha moment. That's when my mission was born. And I am an advocate for parents. I am an advocate for them in saving their children's lives. To me, it is insane that in 2024, one of the leading killers of our children in the United States, one of the leading killer of all age groups in the United States is car crashes. And so out of that tragedy, Maria's message was born through the TV station where we take our message to high schools. I've taken to over 200,000 kids since we started. We provide free defensive driving classes every summer to kids. And my wife, Terry, and I, we started the Maria Tiberi Foundation. We've raised over $2 million, and we provide driving simulators. And if I seem passionate, it is because I am. As I said, this is my mission. There's nothing I can do to bring Maria back. But if I can save other kids and if I can change the bad habits that are out there, that's why I do what I do. And I'm honored to be here with some of the, and Dr. Winston, I've been a big fan of yours for a long time.
Same for you, Dom. You're brave and an important voice in the reality of what a motor vehicle crash can cause. And my heart goes out to you and your family all the time. So I'm going to turn to Dr. Vaca to start. I have a few questions for you, and please, if you have other questions, enter them in the chat, and I'm going to look to Laura and others to help me know if I need to be answering a question. Feel free to interrupt me. So Dr. Vaca, what can parents do, parents of young children, parents of teens who haven't started driving yet, across the age lifespan, what can they do to prepare teens for safe driving and to think about how to reduce crashes on the road?
Yeah, Flora, great question. I kind of divide this up into three pieces, thinking about kind of the, pre-high school time period, elementary school, junior high school period, and then high school, and then thereafter, as they begin to, think about getting licensed. First, at the beginning, this is really kind of the unity, that combination of parents and their teens, or guardians and their teen. The family structures are very different across the United States. Things continue to change in that regard, but we love our kids. We want them to stay safe. So at the very beginning, it really starts and falls in the lap of the parents. Much of injury prevention, the things where these behaviors are trying to prevent, we really look to, what's the behavioral modeling? What's the environment like? What are the parents doing? Because, when you have your child, you learn pretty early on that your kids are always watching you from the time they're infants, toddlers, their mannerisms, their speech. They say things that mom and dad say, and it's like, where did that come from? Well, they're watching, they're listening. So when you begin, when you're driving your children around, when they're in elementary school, junior high, they're watching how you drive, how you go about your day behind the wheel, those sorts of things. So that does set up kind of a model for them of driving. So, there needs to be a little bit of this mindfulness that's going on about, how am I driving? How are my kids perceiving this? Maybe having that discussion even early on, in elementary school, junior high, these sorts of things. We're trying to keep them safe, keep them belted, all those things, so they have the proper restraint, et cetera. So in that time period, it's like, parents need to kind of be aware of the model behavior that they're putting out to their kids. As the kids kind of are thinking, and the parents are thinking about licensure, it's about a discussion right off the bat, as it gets closer to thinking about licensure. What does that look like? Are you ready for it now? There's discussions about developmental readiness. We know as kids, I have two boys, they're much older now, but, they can be very different. Even though they're separated by several years of age, the older one may not be the most developmentally ready, to take on licensure, drive a 3,000-pound vehicle down the road. Maybe the younger one is, those sorts of things, but kind of have that finger on the pulse of where are your kids when it comes to that time and that decision-making for developmental readiness for licensure. And what does that mean for the family? There was just a recent discussion about, we think about driving in independence for the youth, but that also entails and implies quite a bit of independence for the parent itself. And those are things that they're hard to separate, especially when you're trying to think about, should we push the age of driving licensure much later, or et cetera, these sorts of things. It's very difficult to take that in isolation. You have to kind of bring that together. So the discussion and thinking about, what does it mean to be licensed and the responsibilities behind that and the developmental readiness. The last part is to not forego that time period is critical, the graduated driving licensure time period. Across the country, we've got GDL. GDL is integrated into all the states, the jurisdictions of the United States, many other areas, but they all look a little bit different. We know that they've been very effective in reducing fatalities, serious crashes. That's great. But we also know that there's this kind of phenomena that's been going on for quite some time of delaying driving licensure. And what does that mean if kids forego that time period when the policies that are in place are made for youth to kind of graduate, move into more challenging, challenging driving environments, be that, the highway, busy city environments, these sorts of things, maybe areas where they're driving that are less familiar with. Those are important to take advantage of. So as they graduate, when they go into independent driving licensure, they're much more familiar. They understand, they have these mental models of, hazard anticipation, and situations they may not otherwise be aware of should they not have that diversity in driving as they go through this graduated driving licensure period. So those are the kind of the three buckets that I would really kind of take in mind. Mindfulness up front, having to do with behaviors of the parent as they're driving, 2, developmental readiness, and 3, taking advantage of that graduated driving licensure period.
Thank you so much, Dr. Vaca. So what I'm hearing is the role of parents is really quite important. Even if you think it's not in adolescence, it still remains there. And parents are role modeling. They're also they're teaching. And let's not forget, they also can limit whether or not a teen is in a car. Teens who have to look to their parents for safe driving and ability to be able to drive a car are half as likely to crash than those who are just allowed to drive wherever they want, whenever they want. So Devin, Dr. Vaca mentioned GDL. Can you tell us a little bit about what GDL means and what are state policies around that? NTDSS, national standards for driver training. Can you tell us a little bit about where some of these things stand and what they are?
Sure. So GDL serves 2 functions, reducing risk and reducing exposure. It allows beginning drivers to acquire driving experience in less risky situations and under direct supervision. And like Dr. Vaca was saying, all states have some form of GDL, but there's significant variation in between all of those state programs. Research has found that more restrictive GDL programs, like those with at least a 6-month learner permit stage, night restriction beginning at 10 p.m. or earlier, and passenger restriction that allows no more than 1 teen passenger are associated with the biggest reductions in fatal and injury crashes. So states should look at their fatality data periodically and consider changes to their GDL laws if they aren't proven effective.
Yeah, so GDL, excuse me 1 second. So if I'm correct, GDL is graduated driver licensing. Can you just
Yes.
Please tell us exactly what that entails, like what that encompasses for and how that relates to a regular license?
Sure. So you have a learner's permit and then a provisional permit before you are fully licensed. And depending on the state, that can be 6 months or a year at each of those stages, and starting at different ages as well. Some states start 14 and a half, I think, is the earliest. I know I started, I think it's 16 here in DC. That was a while ago. So it gives young people an opportunity to really practice their driving skills in a supervised way in a graduated process. So the licenses give them certain capabilities depending on what stage you're in. Does that answer your question?
It sure does. And so we know that the paper just came out recently that many states require absolutely nothing before licensure. Some only require parent practice driving, but there are national standards for training. And I know that several of the people on the call, including me, I know Dom, we care a lot about training and making sure the teens have the skills. Can you tell us a little more about the national standards for training and where things stand with that?
Sure. So they're the Novice Teen Driver Education and Training Administrative Standards, a mouthful. Shorthand is NTDS. So they're intended to serve as a model to guide all novice teen driver education and training programs throughout the US. So they're for driver educators to really make sure that everyone's providing the same driver education to every student, every young driver. They're a tool that, go ahead.
Yeah, go, keep going.
They're a tool that states can use and organizations too, to make sure that everyone's following sort of the same process. Go ahead, Flaura.
That's great. I think that one of the things that I really look to a lot with NTDS is that parents don't realize is that it takes about 15 hours for a teen to know how to operate a vehicle and not be as jerky a driver, in terms of stopping and starting. But NTDS gets beyond that, right? What are some of the skills that it gets to at that higher level?
For that question, you really need my colleague, Jackie Milani, who knows a lot about this, more than I do, unfortunately.
Yeah, when we get into,
I don't want to.
Yeah, we get into higher order thinking skills and scanning and other kinds of things that I think are really quite important that really point to why driver training is necessary. What do you think the future of driver training looks like?
Ooh, that's a really good question. I think, a lot of folks are saying we're not seeing driver's education in schools as much anymore. So there's a lot of reliance on private driver's ed companies, which of course is an equity concern because not everybody has access to or can afford that driving training experience. So I think there is sort of an opportunity right now to figure out what exactly, who's doing this and what's the role of it and is it being effective, and kind of go from there about, are young people getting the information that they need, and does everyone have access to it and to the best possible available education?
That's really so helpful. Just one last area, well, actually two, is about autonomous vehicles. And so, a lot of people say to me, "Oh, I don't need to worry about driving anymore because we have autonomous vehicles." What do you say to that when people say that comment? What's the way that you think through that?
I think autonomous vehicles will be great when they happen. There's a lot of potential there, but I think it's further away than most people consider. So everyone thinks that there are cars on the road right now that can drive themselves around. And sure, there are some self-driving cars, but they're not fully autonomous vehicles. So it's the silver bullet that everyone thinks is coming tomorrow, and it's, I think, a little further away than most people think. So right now we're in a place where a lot of cars have some really advanced automated features, lane departure warning, blind spot monitoring, adaptive cruise control is all great. But we have a lot of older cars on the road too. So for now, we're kind of in this place where there are lots of different cars, and which I think is tricky for young people in particular, because they might be learning on a car that's older or very new. And then they go to take their driver's test or drive a friend's car or someone else's car, and they might not know the capabilities of the vehicle they're driving, or they might be trying to rely on a technology that's not in the car at the time. So I think it's sort of a kind of a Wild West moment a little bit, because people think that cars can do all of this stuff, but not a lot of cars can quite yet, but hopefully someday.
Yeah, I think I want to turn it over to Dom for a minute. So you've been hearing a lot about what we need to tell parents, what we need to teach teens, and you're out there doing it. Can you tell us, with 150 presentations you've given, what reaction do the teens have to it, and what would you have wanted to hear as a parent around this when Maria was starting to drive?
Well, like I said in the beginning, I had no idea that it is an epidemic, what we have going on. I didn't realize how dangerous it truly is out there. And, besides talking, we'll be making our 160th presentation, high school presentation, but I've taken it to parents groups. I've taken it to colleges. I've taken it to businesses. Over 500,000 people have heard the message now. And the one thing that I've taken away from it is no one ever thinks this is going to happen to them. I'm the one guy that can do this. Everyone else can't do it, but I can. And that's what a lot of people believe. What I would say to parents when I talk to them is that you need to be parents. Understand that you have all the power. You paid for the car, you pay for the cell phone. And I had a lady call me up one time and she goes, "Dom, will you talk to my daughter, please? I know she's texting. She's 16 years old and she's texting when she drives, and I can't make her stop. Can you talk to her?" And I said, "Who pays for the car?" And she said, "I do." I said, "Who pays for her insurance?" She says, "I do." I said, "Who pays for the phone?" "I do." I said, "Your solution is simple. Do you have a school bus that she can ride?" She goes, "Yes." I said, "Tell her that she's riding the bus from now on. You can, unfortunately, sometimes I think we want to be our kids' friends, but we need to be their advocates because they don't think right." As I said, I remember when I was in high school, I didn't have a care in the world. I didn't understand. And you don't get it And what I tell the kids when I talk to them, it's only a half an hour presentation. You can hear a pin drop. But I tell them I'm here because I'm an advocate for your parents, because you guys think you have worries now. You don't understand worries. When you have a child, that's when it starts. And that's what we do. And I tell them, you know when we'll quit, your parents will quit worrying about you? Never, never. And that's what I would tell parents is that, you know, driving a car is a skill. And, you know, you're right. Parents need to be involved. And you got to train your kid. In a lot of states, when you get your temps at 15 and a half, you're supposed to have so many hours driving a car with your child. Some states it's 500 hours. Be out there driving 50 hours, whatever it is, driving. They're not doing it. You got to do it. And, you know, we do these free defensive driving classes during the summer where we bring kids in, and we've partnered with the BMW Club of America and the Porsche Club. And a lot of these guys are race car drivers, and they're teaching them precision moves. And for most of the kids, the first time they've engaged their anti-lock brakes are that day. They're not getting it in driver's ed. And can you imagine if a kid's driving down the road, he slams on the brakes and he feels the car shaking when the anti-lock brakes? Well, you don't want him to let up on the brakes. You know, oh God, I broke mom's car, I broke dad's car. And you know, you've got to put them in those situations. We need to train our children better. And I think as advocates, we can do it. I think there needs to be national standards. I think that, you know, distracted driving, this here, you know, in Ohio, we finally got hands-free law passed. And we have seen a reduction in deaths and crashes. It made a difference. It's easy to describe what distracted driving is. It's alcohol, it's drugs, it's driving with road rage. You know, you saw the tragedy in Philadelphia, outside Philadelphia with the Gaudreau brothers. Just horrible. Lose two young, great family, and they lose those two guys riding a bicycle because a gentleman decided to drink and drive with rage. And when you're driving with rage, you're not, you know, I would argue 80% of the crashes we see on the highway are due to some form of distraction. And there's simply no kindness on the roadways either. We need to understand that driving a car should be from getting to point A to point B, and the mission is to get there safely.
What great points you're making about just really the reality on the road and parents really stepping up. So I was going to go back to Dr. Vaca for a minute, because we've heard about the role of parents and we've heard about the role of driver trainers, driving instructors. What about pediatricians? Why should clinicians, doctors, emergency physicians, why should we all be involved in this? And what can we do?
Yeah, it's, you know, why should we be involved? That's probably the easiest answer, right? Because it's our kids, it's our community, it's our future, you know, the kids in all of this. You know, we tend to think of kids as, you know, as a pediatrician or an emergency medicine physician, whether you're in pediatric emergency medicine or adult emergency medicine, you know, you think of a kind of a relatively static state. This is a person, this is how they are right now. But it's really that lifespan. It's like that continuum of being a child, you know, maybe infancy to booster seat to, you know, to the seatbelt, et cetera, moving through that continuum, licensure, et cetera. We want them to flourish and if we can get them to flourish through that high school time period into that emerging adulthood period, you really want them to launch well into what, you know, me and my team, and we've been doing work in this area, is really health, education, employment. How does transportation fit into that piece of health, education, employment? If you get them to flourish well in that early time period of young adulthood, you know, many things can go very well for even the most vulnerable kids, right? So when we're engaging as physicians, engaging with the population of youth, it really starts with a discussion, you know, first being aware that there's something to talk about here in transportation with our youth, whether that's the tweens, you know, junior high schoolers, you know, and then having that discussion. It doesn't have to be super complex. Lord knows that, you know, all the physicians are squeezed in every kind of clinical context of the time they have. But there are plenty of resources there. What, for a particular state, when do they start getting licensed? When does a provisional licensure kick into play? How many supervised practice hours are needed, et cetera? A one pager is sufficient to have that discussion, pass that on to the youth, pass it on to their parents, and then get them to, understand that, this is an important discussion to have. Start having it now, even though you're 2-3 years away from thinking about licensure. Yeah. So that's critically important. And I think that's where it needs to start. It starts with a discussion. And then throughout that time period, again, it's a continuum. It's not just one visit, in the freshman year, sophomore year, junior year, you have an opportunity as a pediatrician or in other settings, clinical settings, to revisit that point. How are you doing? Did you get your license? Yes or no? I'm thinking about it. Maybe I'm going to wait one more year. Why are you waiting? If you don't want to age out of graduated driver licensure. So you have those discussions and you fit that in. And I don't think it really takes a lot. I mean, you and your team have done a lot of work in this area and you know what that looks like. I just want to say one thing as you had asked Devin about like, what is the training look like in the future? What does it look like? We're living in this world with so much technology that's happening all around us, right? Whether it's advanced driver assisted systems, automated vehicles, these sorts of things. But there are other things where technology is really coming into play right now in certain states. And there's research that's being done this and trying to figure out how do we disseminate this. And this is performance-based licensure. So there's opportunities for states to take on these sorts of things where we can actually and easily, with not a lot of expense, really monitor young drivers, teen drivers on their driving. So you've got parents that are giving, supervised practice driving, but when they're driving independently, we can easily pick up that information on hard braking, quick acceleration, hard cornering, these sorts of things that really kind of feed. We know the research shows it feeds into potential ongoing risky driving in real world settings. We know that it's important. The insurance companies are already doing this. That's why they want you kind of to enroll your teen in a program to try to get, a few dollars off your, monthly bill for insurance. And so kinematic risky driving is what we call it, or kinematic driving, looking at those. So performance-based licensure is something that's really up and coming right now that a lot of people are looking at for this area.
Yeah, so I keep coming back to time zero is the day the teen goes off driving on their own. We need to do everything we can before time zero to prepare them in terms of role modeling, training, lots of experience in lots of places. And now what you're talking about is after they get the license. And I thought Dom was describing it well, and Devin was about the graduation and the privileges and the restrictions. But also now you're talking about something really important is actually the data of like, how are they driving? And can we start thinking about how to use that as part of driving with the teens? Well, I think that a lot of this really comes down to what we're willing to do as parents, what we're willing to accept. And so I think that Devin might be able to give us some data on why it's so important in terms of impaired driving. What are we hearing about this risky driving and what risks that plays in terms of crashes? It's bad enough that you have teens on the road who aren't adequately prepared and they make mistakes. But now what happens with impairment and with distraction? Do you have some data on that, Devin?
Sure. So I think no matter what the behavior is, teens don't fully understand how dangerous the potential consequences are if they don't follow the rules of the road. There are a lot of statistics available in its.gov, but there are also some basic things young people should understand as well as their parents. And there are things like wearing a seatbelt in every position in a car or vehicle is the best thing you can do. And I've heard a lot about societal pressure and parental pressure related to distraction. Kids need to be reachable and engaged in their networks and their social apps all the time. So distracted driving is, consuming a lot of us for that reason. And of course, drowsy driving comes up all the time with young people. They're not getting enough sleep, just like the rest of us aren't getting enough sleep. But them being drowsy and on the road, compounds their risk. When it comes to alcohol, I do have some statistics. So 30% of young drivers 15 to 20 years old who were killed in traffic crashes in 2022 had blood alcohol concentrations of 0.01 grams per deciliter or higher. 30%. And 25% had BACs of 0.08 or higher. 0.08, of course, is the legal limit for people 21 and older. So for them, it's very illegal to even have, 0.01 or 0.02 in their system. So the fact that so many young people are being caught or killed with that much alcohol in their systems is a real cause for concern. And the other thing I would be remiss if I didn't mention is the perception that young people seem to have that marijuana is safer than alcohol, which is combating that is the next frontier, I think, for me in particular. So, and my plea to all of the medical folks is that if you're prescribing a medication or you're telling someone to use like an over-the-counter cold medication, please convey to the young people who may not be as familiar with the concept that their vehicle is a heavy machine. We don't usually think about that. We think about backhoes and that sort of thing, but it's really important for them to know that medications of any kind can impair them and really make their driving incredibly dangerous. So all of those things combined, I think, are really conversations that we need to keep having. And, one fatality is one too many, and we have a lot more than that right now. So all of it plays a major role.
Wow, what sobering information. I tend to think about, that you have about 2 seconds from the time you detect a hazard to being able to put action in place that's going to be stopping the potential crash. And with teens who already may not know how to drive, any form of distraction will cause them to have less than 2 seconds, but impairment will get in the way of like actually making the action be effective. So that's why we're seeing these horrible numbers that we need to keep in play, and not forget that drowsiness is one of the biggest impairments that teens have. I wonder if, going back again to Dom, he can speak a little bit to distraction. Tell us a little bit more about your thoughts in terms of keeping your eye on the road, your mind on the task of driving, your hands on the wheel. How hard is that for people to do? And what do you suggest for people who just are so used to being on screens all the time?
Well, and somewhere, driving a car used to be getting, like I said, from getting to point A to point B. Now it's a place where we conduct business. It's a place where we entertain our friends. It's where we eat our breakfast, lunch, and dinner. We do everything in the car as well as try to drive. And, I argue that, it's easy to say what distracted driving is. Like you said, it's anything to take your hands, eyes, or mind off your driving. And alcohol certainly takes your mind off driving. Being tired certainly takes your mind off driving. Driving with rage certainly takes your mind off driving. And all these things lead to the tragedies that we see on the highway. And the statistics, I told the governor one day, and he lost his daughter. The governor of Ohio lost his daughter in a car crash. And I said, the thing I take away when I hear statistics, and what comes to me as a father, is that every one of those statistics have a name. Every one of those statistics have a family that's missing them. And to me, like I said in the beginning, it is insane that in 2024, we continue to allow this to happen. And it's, as you said, Dr. Winston, so preventable.
Yeah.
Distracted driving is underreported, not only in Ohio, but around the United States. You got to be the village idiot to get a distracted driving ticket because, you run into the back of someone, policeman comes up and says, "What happened?" Well, you're probably on the phone, you were doing something. I don't know, I just didn't see him. And so it's so underreported. And, what I told the folks here in Ohio is we shouldn't give out the statistics because we know that it is an epidemic and the statistics don't equal to what we're seeing on the highway. During the height of COVID, I want to say in the United States, and correct me if I'm wrong, I want to say travel was down some 30-some% nationwide. I know it was in Ohio, and yet we saw crashes and deaths go up. And people go, why? Because there were less cars on the highway and people were driving faster. And I don't know, but I have noticed since COVID, that behavior has continued on our highways, that people drive so aggressively. And now you have situations, at least here in Ohio, where you have these takeovers, where you have people now that they decided they're going to start racing on the highways. I know that some of the police departments here in Central Ohio did a crackdown. They arrested 200 people. But all this is going on the highways. And oh, by the way, we got a 16-year-old that just got their license, and they're out with these people. And it's just a recipe for disaster. And so my message to parents, to the medical people, we all have a vested interest in this. You know, we asked the good doctor here, why is it important? Because he's going to go home tonight and he wants to get home safely to his family. His life is on the line. All of our lives are on the line when we drive a car today.
Dr. Vaca, can you share with us any particular stories that come to mind of what it was like to be a doctor talking to families about this in your emergency departments? Just assuming that you had to talk to someone about a motor vehicle crash at some point in your career.
Yeah, where do I start? 30 years of emergency medicine from, caring for people from a whole host of things, whether it's sepsis, heart attacks, strokes, gunshot wounds, stabbings, all the above. But, one of the most prevalent, and devastating pieces are the motor vehicle crashes, Friday night, Saturday night, oftentimes, even the middle of the week. We know the weekends tend to be, time period, especially evening, kind of, I say the bewitching hour. When my kids were learning to drive, it's like, once you start driving past about 8, 9 o'clock, I said, things change. And once you start getting later than that, even more so. If you look at the fatality data, once you start getting to late evenings, especially the early mornings, it's, the fatalities go way up. So it's very difficult. And, how do you compete with this when, trying to save a life in the emergency department, starting, immediately after the crash with our EMS, our paramedics, providers, trying to get people to the right trauma center, getting them to the right center where they can get the right care, and all the above types of injuries, whether it's head injuries, abdominal injuries, long bone fractures that can easily take their lives. And we're there for one reason, and that's to save a life. With my colleagues over the 30 years of doing emergency medicine. And then in the great opportunity we have is to be able to engage with the family, let them know what's going on. Unfortunately, it's not always as great as we want it to be able to say, your child's okay, has some injuries or whatever. Sometimes just the opposite. And we're saying, we've been trying to resuscitate them for the last 30, 40, 50 minutes. And unfortunately, we were unsuccessful. And so there is just nothing that can make that ever better and easy. And so, in fact, that's what drove me into traffic safety in the late 1990s, was to move beyond the doors of the emergency department because of the things that I was seeing in the emergency department, initially with small children, toddlers. It was a time when the infant seats, people were using that. The hospitals, you could not take your child home, without the nurse seeing that your child was in an infant seat. But the booster seat, as you well know, much even better than I did in that time period, booster seats had not penetrated. And it was even further so in Southern California, where I was at that time, our Spanish-speaking population, predominantly Spanish-speaking population, it was even more difficult because the health literacy and prevention in that area was very, very low, as well for the country in that time period, in the late 1990s. But it was getting out to the communities, door to door, in some of the most vulnerable communities, and trying to make a difference there with child occupant safety. And the rest is history, at least from my perspective, as far as the work that I've done. But there is so much work, day to day, month to month, year to year, because there's new parents of teens, new parents of infants every single day. And this message never stops. It can't.
Yeah, so I'm looking at it, it's 12:50, and I want to try to get the main points, just reiterate the most important points about our teen drivers. And the most common serious crash scenarios that we see are, and the errors that they're making, they're not scanning and paying attention, they're going too fast for the road conditions, they're not keeping their eyes on the road the way they should. And so these are the kinds of things we need to be focusing on, particularly in the early licensure, as well as making sure that they're not distracted by passengers, they're following GDL. It's really life and death that we're talking about with our teens. So when we go through all of this and we're thinking about the roles of doctors, parents, the community, our laws, can you, each of you, like, say, what is the thing that's most on your mind that's really burning, that you really want to make sure that everybody hears, that you maybe said or didn't say, that you want to reiterate in the last minutes we have? And I will start with Dr. Vaca.
Yeah, I would say, as we're looking again, kind of a lifespan perspective, kind of early, even pre-licensure time period. And I think my main message initially goes out to the parents, modeling that behavior, that driving behavior. And it's the driving behavior. How are they behind the wheel? And that also kind of couples into we talked about impairment, whether it's alcohol, drug use, medication use, those sorts of things. The kids are also watching. You have 1, 2, 3 beers, at dinner, and then take the whole family home, these sorts of things. And we can have lots of discussions about when does impairment really start and that sort of thing, but they're watching that all the time. If it's okay for my mom and dad to do, now I'm 15, 16, 17 years old, or even of age, legal drinking, oh, that wasn't a big deal. My parents did that all the time, but the driving, that's critically important. So that modeling behavior, I would say a lot of it starts right there. They see that, they create mental models of what's acceptable. We talk about social norms, injunctive norms, those sorts of things, what's acceptable, what I perceive or what others perceive is acceptable, really, really, really matters. Because once you set up kind of the right trajectory, the additional things like licensure, when is it right? Are you developmentally ready? And you're having those discussions with your kids, and the teens understand that, it makes it, I think, a bit easier for that. There's much more to learn, but that's where I would start.
So the first driving lessons occurs when the child is in the forward-facing car seat. Is that what you're trying to say?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. All right, Devin, tell us, what do you want to make sure that everybody hears?
There's a question in the chat about what public health departments can do at the state level. And my request is get to know the people in your state highway safety office and partner together and figure out if there's absolutely overlap between traffic safety and health. So befriend your state highway safety office folks, get to know them, maybe host some webinars for your community, whatever you are capable of doing. I think we tend to work in silos, and traffic safety is absolutely health, at least for me. So there's that piece I think is so important.
Oh, I'm now seeing, I'm sorry that I could not monitor the chat at the same time. So I'm seeing there actually are some wonderful questions. Like Gary asked about what we can learn from other countries. Can some people answer that? Sorry about that. I hadn't seen those.
I know other countries. I don't know much. I just know worldwide we lose over 1 million people every year in car crashes. It's awful. I know in Germany it's not cheap to get your driver's license. I know in the United States a lot of times we pick up driver's ed on what the price is. And I know Germany, it's not, but I don't think they have. I think from what I've been told, I don't know that they might drive a little better in Germany, that they don't have, and you guys might know that. But I know when I talk to a lot of parents, they say, "Boy, it's just so expensive." But what's your child's life worth is what I would say.
Exactly.
Yeah, you're going down. Go on, Fred.
I was going to say yes, and as Don was saying, it's in many parts of the world, it's developed world, it's very expensive. The UK it's very expensive to get even set up to, take your license. And if you happen to fail your test, it's not like you can come in 2 days later and retake it. Many times you have to wait an extensive amount of time. And if you're at a loss of a vehicle, like that is not licensure, and you can't get to work, it's going to be really difficult. But one of the things that's, a couple of other countries have done, UK being one of them, is to integrate hazard recognition, hazard anticipation testing as part of the licensure piece, which is really, really important. A lot of people, or some people here in the United States, have begun to do that, looking at the research. Does that make a difference? Here in California several years ago, the Integrated did a study and they randomized, Department Motor Vehicles with, teens coming in to get their license, and some got that kind of quiz on hazard anticipation, and then followed them forward, and it was found to be effective in certain groups of teens. So that was really good. But in the UK, it's pretty standard. And what that does is it allows, the new driver to learn how to anticipate. They get, primed on that, looking for hazards, what to anticipate, slowing down, these sorts of things. So there are many strategies, including extending graduated driving licensure. If, like in Australia, if you're 30, 35 years old, first time license, you're going to go through graduated driver licensure. Sometimes that creates other issues, like who's going to supervise your practice driving, these sorts of things, but it is really important. And in the United States, there's just a few states, and I think DC, that have some form of extended graduated driver licensure, but they're all very different. So there's quite a bit of variability, and it's not like where we really want it to be just yet, but that's something that is currently on a lot of discussion and debate.
Yeah, what I would like to see is we do need uniformity. I agree with you 100%. I know there's a lot of medical folks on here, and I do want to just say one thing. You guys are doing God's work. You see families in the worst situations, and if I could just share what it was like for Maria, we got notified. Her accident was actually at 9:37 at night, but we didn't get notified till 2:37 in the morning, and there were 7 policemen on my front porch that rang the doorbell, and nobody wants a cop till there's one not around, but those guys were heartbroken. There wasn't a dry eye there. That is the worst thing that they do, having to notify a family that your child's not coming home. And then I had to go to the hospital and identify my daughter. And I will tell you, for you folks out there, that was the hardest thing I ever had to do. And I know how devastated the emergency team was. The doctor was just heartbroken. She was crying. And I could not believe I was leaving my daughter. And I walked in and out of that room 10 times. I couldn't believe I was leaving her. So for you folks that do this, you are doing God's work. And the good news is, because of medical science, most of the kids get saved. But what's their quality of life? So never, ever, if you're coming into this business, never lose sight of how important you are. And, and the last thing I would say is, as parents, practice with your kids. We can fix this. We can fix this. We need to create a generation of defensive drivers, not distracted driving, defensive drivers. On the highway, drive the car every day like your life depends on it, because it does.
So on that note, I see great comments, questions in here. I hope this is the beginning of a conversation, not the end. But I know that I have to turn it back over to Dr. Smith. Thank you so much to my panelists. You all were fabulous with such good information. Dr. Vaca, Devin, and Dom, thank you for all the great work you do. And I'm going to turn it back over to Dr. Smith. And thank you also to Katie and Laura and all the residents for all the work you did in preparing for today. And Tracy.
Thank you, Flaura. So I want to echo the thanks and just what an amazing discussion and set of presentations and information that we received. I know we weren't able to get to all the questions, but I would love to just say, reach out to us. We can put you in touch with our panelists or other resources to get answers for you. I would especially like to thank our fantastic moderator panelists for their insightful discussion on teen driving safety. And, folks, you're listening to people who've been doing this probably together over 100 years of research and experience you've just heard today. So what a phenomenal resource to hear from. I'd also like to thank the T4CIP trainees, the faculty facilitators, the Prevent Child Injury members, and of course, Tracy Meehan, Laura Datner, Katie Donovan, Nikki Guzik, and others who work behind the scenes to help organize and promote the webinar. And especially thank you to all of you who attended today. Really appreciate your attendance, and thank you for your questions. I do want to give just one quick announcement, and that is that today at 3 p.m. Eastern Time, we are having a Twitter chat or an X chat. The hashtag is #RulesForTheRoad, all one word, Rules for the Road. That's the hashtag. We'd love to have you join us. There'll be more discussion about teen driving safety at that time. So thank you all. That concludes today's webinar. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Thanks to all.
Driving.
Thank you.
Everyone.